just enough time to literally get the bikes off the car, get kitted up and get onto the grid. And we're like, everyone's a lot older than us. So we'd entered the fun category because we were like, well, we're new to this. That sounds like the right thing. But we didn't realize that was an adult category. So I don't know how we managed it, but we'd entered an adult mountain bike race at the age of like 12 or 13 on these shonky bikes.
You've been a fan of the sport for so long. It's amazing the amount of stats that you know, even back to the 90s. What's your background in mountain biking, and how do you have such a knowledge base to be able to have this podcast?
Well, I'm a geek, I guess. So I retain, but I think I do also do a lot of research. So not all of those stats are in my head at any one point. I'm too old for stuff like that to stay in my brain these days. But yeah, I guess going back to when I was pretty young, I was a bored kid and I didn't really know. I knew I needed a hobby, but like I didn't know what that was. Like nothing. I guess I would have been like 10, 11-ish, that kind of age. And I was like, I need something and I don't really know what I am yet or what I'm into. And I did, you know, all sorts of stupid things like collecting postcards and all of that. Like, oh, what's the list of hobbies? And, you know, this was, I guess, in the 80s or early 90s, late 80s. And yeah, I just dabbled with loads of boring stuff. I joined Scouts because my best mate at school was into that, which was super good for me and gave me that ability to like get outside and do all that kind of, you know, all that sort of stuff. And one evening we did a bike race in the local woods, and I had a Rally Mustang at the time, like very early, I mean, in inverted commas, mountain bike, not really a mountain bike in what we're used to. So fully rigid, canty brakes, 18 gears that barely worked and weren't indexed in any way. So you just had to hunt around with the friction of the shifter. And yeah, we took all our bikes out the woods, and the scout leaders set out a little track, I guess, that was, I don't remember how long it was, but like it was fairly, you know, it was enough. And me and another lad, Jamie, who went to a different school but was at our scout troop, just absolutely loved it. We were like, this is what we want to do. Like we just totally buzzed off it. And I don't know, whatever night we used to get scouts, like Thursday or something, we were like, right, okay, Monday, should we meet up after school, like, and go riding, come to the woods? Like, okay, sweet. And it just went from there, eh? Like, I mean, mountain biking, I guess, was in the fairly early days. Like there wasn't, maybe MBUK existed as a magazine. I can't really remember, but there wasn't much, you know, no internet, none of that stuff. So there wasn't much outside world to look at. It was just a case of us riding bikes in the woods and experimenting and building really badly built jumps. And
at this point, it was early 90s.
Yeah, I guess it would have been early 90s. Yeah. And then whether MBUK sort of started or whether we discovered it. So we were like, oh, this is a thing that exists. So that's cool. And you get that inspiration. You start to see other riders, and we found a few other people locally, just knocking about in the woods. You'd see other people that were enjoying riding their bikes in the woods that were similar age, and we all started to hang out together a bit and see what you could do, like ride off stupid drops and build jumps and try and go fast around turns and all of that jazz, I guess. That's kind of where it started, yeah.
I think a lot of people listening to this can relate to childhood like that.
Yeah.
Stacking up planks of wood, jumping off of them.
I got, my next bike was a Saracen Tough Tracks Elite, I think, which for some reason they had on sale. Like my parents could only afford the lower one, but they had the Elite on for the same price. So I was like super stoked on that. I had it a couple of days, and we built a ramp outside Jamie's house on a couple of bricks, like so sketchy. I remember hitting that, just getting massively bucked. And I had a huge crash into a wall or something, and the bike landed on top of the wall and put a massive dent in the frame. It's like 2 days old. No, man, not good. But we all did it, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't buy them, you don't have them to look at them.
This is true.
Should be well used.
Yeah,
some people do, maybe. Yeah. Not us.
Yeah.
So, and then following along with the racing, is that something you've just been a fan of?
I mean, initially I went racing. So we got the magazines, and you see that racing's a thing, and we're like, okay, well, that, you know, why wouldn't we have a go at that? Seems kind of cool. So I think we'd said to Jamie's parents or my parents, like, we want to have a go. And Jamie's family always used to go to Cheddar, to the campsite there, like it was a place they'd been as a family. And I guess they were on a mailing list or something back in the day. And they'd said, oh, we've got this bike race coming up. And Jamie's dad said, oh, I'll drive you. Do you guys want to enter? We would have been like 13, 12, I don't know, young. And we're like, yeah, sick. We'll have a go at that then. Why not?
Cross country.
Cross country, yeah. Because there probably were a few downhills maybe at that point, but still very limited. Yeah. Mostly XC. So, we entered that. And Jamie's dad borrowed like a bike rack for the roof of the car because we didn't have any other way of getting the bikes there. And we just went for the day. And it took, I don't know how long, but a long time to work out how to use this bike rack he'd borrowed. So by the time I remember setting off at like some ridiculous speed down the M4 motorway across to Cheddar from where we live. I grew up in Reading. And we got there really late, just enough time to literally get the bikes off the car, get kitted up and get onto the grid. And we're like, everyone's a lot older than us. So we'd entered the fun category because we were like, well, we're new to this. That sounds like the right thing. But we didn't realize that was an adult category. So I don't know how we managed it, but we'd entered an adult mountain bike race at the age of like 12 or 13 on these shonky bikes. And so we had to do like, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 laps. It's a pretty big course. It was wet and like quite sticky, clayey kind of mud. It was brutal. But again, when you're kids, you just like, you buzz for everything, don't you, like that? So it was a great experience. But yeah, first race. So yeah, did a bit of racing, XC initially, dabbled a little bit with downhill. Because I guess that was what looked cool, right? It was in the magazines, and it was Steve P, it was Rob Warner, Will Longdon, it was those guys, Pagey, that were in the mags and were like making downhill look super cool. And so we just idolized that lot, and it was flat pedals and it was whatever they were doing, and Dave's chain device on the bike and mismatched grip colors because they were doing it and it looked cool and all this kind of stuff. So I guess we were consuming racing through the mags because there was no other way to do it. And then I went off to university and like didn't have a huge amount of money, I only had a hardtail at that point and didn't have a car, so I couldn't really travel easily. So I sort of stepped away from racing then, I guess, a bit, and the other guys from back home sort of carried on, and some of them were pretty handy and, you know, not into elite, but could potentially have got into elite. Like they were pretty good riders, some of them. And so I used to attend when I could get to a race. I'd go and watch those boys race really, because I just didn't have the kit and I wasn't up to speed. So I just got into going to races, and I've always, I guess, consumed it in the magazines. And then as television and video and all that sort of stuff came along, like Sprung and Earthed, and I mean, who didn't want to watch all that stuff when it came out? Like, why wouldn't you? It was like, I think it would be harder to not be into the racing than to be into it back then.
Yeah. I think I watched Earth 5. That was like right around when I got into it. Earth 4, Earth 5, like 200 times each.
Yeah, we wore out the VHS tapes. Yeah.
And I think one of the coolest things about amateur racing, like the stuff that you guys did, is a lot of the times you're doing it at the same venue as the elite racing.
Yeah.
And especially in the UK with how many good riders there are, it's got to be so cool to turn up and get to see guys like Steve Pete and Rob Warner at some of the races and sit next to him on a shuttle, or like in the end, the sport's kind of the right size where
100%.
you can have access to those guys, and they're just one of us.
They're just other bike riders.
So that's got to be pretty inspiring from the UK.
100%. Yeah, it was cool. You could always watch the elite racing, and I remember watching those guys and just being baffled by how they did it. Minar came to a couple of like British races because he spent a bit of time in the UK when he was in the sort of Animal Orange stuff. So we saw a young Greg Minar like finding his feet, and everyone was like, who's this guy? Like pulling massive suicides over any jump he could find. And yeah, it was cool, man. It was really good because there was, I mean, there is now, but there was a really strong UK downhill scene then. Like it was probably US, Australia, and UK that had the sort of 3 scenes with all the big names of riders that you'd know back then. And so you could go and see those guys race. And I grew up quite near Rob Warner, so we used to occasionally like see those guys. There's a nightclub in town, and you'd occasionally see, like, if Pete'd come visit Warner or whatever, you'd see those boys in there with like James Alloway and some of that lot back in the day. And we'd be like, whoa, it's like Steve Pete and Rob Warner in the club.
Nice.
And get super excited, but never speak to them. Just like stare at them from afar and admire them.